Imagine a letter buried in dust and time, written by the man who mapped the human soul. A letter never meant to be public. A warning never meant to be ignored. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, once confessed in private correspondence that modern women were becoming spiritually dangerous, not because they were evil, but because they were possessed. Possessed not by demons, but by something more subtle and psychological: the animus. Jung believed that as women gained outer freedom, many would lose inner cohesion. They would speak with conviction, but not wisdom. They would lead with opinion, but not insight. They would confront men, not as partners, but as projections of their inner wound. Carl Jung wrote, "When the animus is not made conscious, it possesses the woman and speaks in place of her soul." In this video, we'll unearth the forgotten psychology of feminine shadow possession. This is your warning and your invitation. Like the video and subscribe. It's time to take control. In 1951, Carl Jung wrote a letter to a former patient. In it, he warned about a disturbing trend he was seeing in women. They speak in voices not their own. It is not femininity that speaks, but the animus disguised as thought. This wasn't a journal article. It wasn't peer-reviewed. It was raw. It was confidential. And according to those who preserved it, it was one of the few times Jung openly admitted his deepest fear: that the modern world would give women power, but not the tools to wield it without destruction. Jung had seen this firsthand in the Weimar era, a time of radical feminism, collapsing morality, and spiritual fragmentation. He noticed something chilling. Women weren't becoming free. They were becoming fractured. And into that fracture stepped the animus, the masculine voice inside every woman that, when left unconscious, becomes critical, hostile, and inflated with false authority. In his letters to Sabine Spielrein, Tony Wolfe, and others, Jung described how this inner masculine, if not confronted, would begin to possess the woman, turning her into a channel for dogma, perfectionism, emotional manipulation, and even spiritual superiority. "The animus is opinionated," he wrote. "It substitutes logic for love, dogma for dialogue." He wasn't demonizing women. He was warning men. Because the danger of an unconscious animus isn't just to the woman herself, it's to the men who enter her orbit unaware. You think you're in a relationship, but you're in a projection. You think you're loved, but you're being used to exercise ghosts she won't name. And the more you love her, the more you collapse. Jung didn't say this in a book. He whispered it in a letter, and now, 70 years later, we're watching it unfold in homes, in therapy rooms, in marriages that look perfect, but feel like war. This isn't history. This is prophecy. And we're just beginning. To understand what Jung meant by possession, you have to understand the animus. In Jungian psychology, the animus is the unconscious masculine within the woman, just as the anima is the unconscious feminine within the man. But unlike the poetic muse that the anima often becomes for a man, the animus, when undeveloped, can be ruthless, cold, detached from the body, seduced by ideas over intimacy. Jung described it this way: "The animus is the word, but not the wisdom." When the animus is integrated, a woman becomes discerning, focused, and confident. She can speak truth without wounding. She can lead without controlling. But when the animus is unconscious, it doesn't express, it possesses. And possession is exactly what Jung feared would rise in the modern woman. Let's be clear. This is not about intelligence or strength. This is about disembodiment, when a woman's thoughts become sharp, detached, aggressive, and emotionally void. She begins to dominate conversations. She becomes intolerant of ambiguity. She uses words as weapons, not to discover truth, but to impose her narrative. She becomes overly rational in appearance, but deeply irrational in action. She doesn't relate. She debates. She doesn't listen. She corrects. She doesn't love. She lectures. And the more pain she carries beneath the surface, the louder the animus becomes. It is always the animus, Jung wrote, that makes a woman assert her own opinion and defend it obstinately, often without really knowing what it is based on. This is not opinion. This is psychological distortion. And if you, as a man, don't recognize it for what it is, you'll find yourself arguing with the wrong thing. Not her possession. Jung warned that the animus often masquerades as clarity, but it thrives on inner fragmentation. It promises strength, but delivers alienation. Now look around. The explosion of hyper-independence. The rise of ideological feminism, rooted in vengeance, not vision. The abandonment of relational empathy for moral superiority. These are not random social shifts. They are symptoms of animus possession in a culture that rewards the mask over the mirror. And here's the danger. An animus-possessed woman doesn't want connection. She wants conquest. She doesn't want a man. She wants a subject. If you challenge her, she resents you. If you submit, she despises you. You cannot win, because she's not engaging with you. She's at war with the phantom father, the faithless lover, the dogmatic man who once violated her inner world. And you've just stepped into his shadow. You didn't insult her. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't betray her trust. But suddenly, she's cold, short, critical. Not openly hostile, but everything you say now has a wrong tone. Every decision you make is challenged. You feel like you've been quietly moved from her lover to her opponent, and you don't understand why. This is the moment Jung feared most, when a woman, possessed by the animus, turns the man before her into a reflection of the enemy within herself. The animus never forgets a wound, Jung wrote. It collects injuries like weapons, storing them for the next confrontation. What does this mean for men? It means you will be punished for what someone else did. Her absent father, her critical brother, her manipulative ex. You have inherited their crimes. You have become their replacement. Not in her awareness, but in her psyche. This is called projection. When a person unconsciously places unresolved parts of their inner life onto another. You are no longer a man. You are a mirror. And the more you try to prove that you are not like them, the deeper into the trap you fall. Because here's the paradox. The more you submit to her inner critic, the more she will despise you for not breaking it. The more you absorb, the more she attacks. Not because she hates you, but because part of her needs to reenact her pain, to feel alive, to justify her armor, to avoid the terrifying work of self-confrontation. This is the power of the possessed animus. It turns love into war, and intimacy into interrogation. You'll notice her words become more abstract. You never understand. You always make me feel this way. You're just like the others. She no longer speaks to you. She speaks at you. Through the voice of every man she never integrated. And unless you are clear, internally and philosophically, you will shrink in shame. You'll start proving, explaining, pleading, but you cannot out-logic the animus. You cannot outperform a projection. You cannot convince a possessed mind that you are real, because she doesn't want real. She wants resolution through dominance. And if she cannot resolve her inner wound, she will attempt to dominate you. That is the rise of the inner critic. And that is how men, good men, grounded men, become enemies in the eyes of a woman who no longer sees clearly. There was a time when the feminine inspired. She was mystery. She was receptivity. She was the mirror in which a man saw his strength and his soul. She was his muse, but something has changed. The muse is gone, replaced not by weakness, but by competition. The feminine no longer reflects. She challenges, she debates, she rivals, she dominates. This is the feminine reversal, the transformation of the nurturing, inspiring archetype into an adversarial presence. And it didn't begin on TikTok. It began decades ago, as culture exchanged beauty for power, and men silently surrendered their frame to avoid being labeled oppressive. The result? Men are now trying to prove their worth to women who no longer want to be inspired by them, but to defeat them. Jung saw this coming. If the animus gains the upper hand, the woman no longer serves eros, but logos, without humility. She becomes not a vessel for connection, but a voice for critique. This is the woman who no longer seeks union. She seeks control. She doesn't want to be held. She wants to win. The man who was once her initiator becomes her intellectual sparring partner. The masculine frame she once admired becomes the standard she now aims to surpass. And slowly, the polarity that once made desire magnetic dissolves into antagonism. You've seen it. The couple that turns every conversation into a courtroom. The dating profiles that read like job applications. The woman who measures your masculinity not by what you build, but by how well you obey her emotional criteria. This isn't strength. It's reversed polarity, and it kills attraction. It kills intimacy. It kills the muse. Even feminist philosophers have warned about this. Simone de Beauvoir, in her private journals, worried that women had begun to imitate men badly, abandoning feminine power for masculine mimicry. José Ortega y Gasset described the spoiled woman of modernity, a woman with all the rights, none of the responsibilities, and a spiritual emptiness she cannot name. And what does she do with that emptiness? She fills it by testing men, challenging men, resenting men. She competes. But here's the tragedy. You cannot make love to your rival. You cannot lead someone who refuses to be moved. You cannot be inspired by a mirror that reflects only defiance. The muse is not weak. She is powerful because she amplifies the man, not because she overtakes him. But when the animus takes control of a woman's psyche, she forgets this. She tries to become what she was never meant to dominate, the masculine principle itself. And in doing so, she loses not only her connection to men, but also her connection to her own soul. By the time he realizes it, it's already too late. He stopped speaking directly. He tiptoes around topics. He delays his convictions, softens his tone, and rewrites his instincts. He tells himself he's being understanding, evolved, emotionally intelligent. But the truth is harder. He's surrendered to the animus, not consciously, not with ceremony, but slowly, piece by piece. And now, he is no longer leading. He is performing. He is the man Jung feared would become the spiritual casualty of female possession, a man who mistakes appeasement for intimacy and confusion for care. When a man projects his anima onto a woman without awareness, Jung wrote, he becomes her subject, not her counterpart. This is the reversal. The man who once carried direction now seeks permission. The man who once stood firm now checks in. The man who once created now curates himself to avoid conflict. He thinks he's gaining love. He's actually trading away his masculine center, inch by inch. He becomes the emotionally safe man. But safety, in this context, doesn't mean strength. It means predictability, passivity, emotional availability without direction. And here's what no one tells him. She stops respecting him. Because the woman, animus possessed or not, is drawn to clarity, to power, to presence. And the man who sacrifices his inner truth for her outer comfort will eventually be punished for the very thing he was taught to perform. You'll hear it. You're too soft. I need a real man. I feel like I'm the one leading. And he'll be confused. Because didn't he do everything right? Didn't he listen? Didn't he support her process? Didn't he trade his standards for emotional peace? Yes. And that's the problem. She didn't want peace. She wanted polarity. She didn't want obedience. She wanted truth. But he couldn't give it. Because he was already owned. Owned by the idea that masculine authority is dangerous. Owned by the guilt that his power must be softened. Owned by the illusion that love means adapting instead of embodying. And so the collapse begins. His voice fades. His direction dims. His purpose withers. He becomes resentful, not just of her, but of himself. He knows he gave something up, but he can't name it. And she, sensing his resentment, grows colder. The polarity dies. The relationship becomes therapy, and neither of them can remember why they came together in the first place. This is the man's collapse, and it happens in millions of relationships across the world, every day. Not because he was weak, but because no one taught him what the animus was. No one told him that when a woman is at war with her inner masculine, she will test yours until you either stand or disappear. By now, you've seen the spiral, the rise of the animus, the reversal of polarity, the collapse of the man. But this video isn't about despair. It's about returning to the center, to the standard, to the man who cannot be moved because he knows where he stands. And for Jung, that journey begins with one word: individuation. The process of becoming whole, not by avoiding the shadow, but by confronting and integrating it. Individuation is not a retreat from conflict, Jung said, but a reconciliation with the opposites within. For a man, this means facing the anima, the inner feminine, and reclaiming his own masculine principle, not as performance, but as essence. Because here's the truth. You don't defeat the animus in her. You reveal the animus in you. You face the part of you that seeks to be chosen, adapts to be accepted, softens to avoid rejection, and you reclaim what you disowned, your aggression, your conviction, your unapologetic direction. Individuation is not about controlling her. It's about no longer being controlled by her. When a man individuates, he no longer mirrors a woman's emotional chaos. He reflects her with clarity and lets her choose whether to rise or retreat. He stops asking, "What does she want from me?" and starts asking, "What have I betrayed in myself to be loved?" He no longer seeks peace through performance. He finds peace in alignment. And when she tests him, as the animus-possessed woman always will, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't argue. He doesn't chase. He remains still, uncompromised. And in doing so, he becomes the mirror she cannot manipulate. Jung warned that the man who fails to individuate will always become entangled in a woman's inner war. Not because she's evil, but because she's unconscious. And the only way to guide the unconscious feminine is to embody the conscious masculine. Not as a savior, as a standard. You don't teach her with your words. You teach her with your presence. You don't argue with her animus. You outgrow it. Because here's the secret. A woman cannot possess a man who has already integrated his own feminine. She cannot reverse a polarity that is already whole. Individuation is the escape, not from her. From yourself, the version of you who collapsed. Not every woman is your adversary. Not every woman is possessed. Not every feminine force seeks to unseat the masculine. But every woman, every single one, will test you. Not out of malice, but out of instinct. And what that test reveals is everything. Is she the one who deepens your sovereignty or erodes it? Jung didn't just write about the possessed woman. He also wrote about the transformed one, the woman who confronts her animus, integrates it, and emerges as a force of wisdom and wholeness. When the animus is made conscious, Jung wrote, he becomes a bridge to the logos, not a tyrant over it. This woman doesn't compete. She doesn't crush. She doesn't try to out-masculine the masculine. She doesn't need to. Because she has integrated her own authority. She respects clarity. She honors boundaries. She speaks with discernment, not projection. This woman will challenge you, but not from resentment. She will ask you to rise, but not by shrinking yourself. She will mirror your growth, but not demand your conformity. She is not perfect, but she is present. She has met her pain. She has seen her shadow. She doesn't punish you for being a man. She invites you to become one, fully. This is the woman who awakens, and she is rare, because most women don't want to do this work. Why? Because it hurts. Because it dissolves illusions. Because it demands they give up the intoxicating control that comes from projection. And those who refuse the inner work become saboteurs. They don't want wholeness. They want drama. They don't want partnership. They want leverage. These are the women who use silence as punishment, standards as manipulation, emotion as strategy. They are emotionally intelligent, but spiritually evasive. They speak of trauma, but never of responsibility. They demand evolution, but refuse introspection. You must know the difference, because your energy is sacred. Your leadership is finite, and the woman you let close will either expand your frame or dismantle it from the inside out. So, how do you tell? A woman who is awake respects truth, even when it cuts. She welcomes boundaries. She takes accountability. She doesn't shrink from polarity. She amplifies it. She doesn't need to dominate your center, because she has found her own. The saboteur, on the other hand, will test your strength not to admire it, but to break it. And if you let her, she will. This is not about fear. It's about discernment. Because you are not here to save women. You are here to build. And if a woman cannot stand beside your vision without needing to edit, soften, or redirect it, she is not your muse. She is your test. And the awakened man does not argue with tests. He passes them. You've seen her shadow. You've felt her projection. You've watched the reversal, how love becomes war and masculinity becomes guilt. Now you understand why Jung wrote those warnings in private, because what he saw coming wasn't just a change in women. It was a test for men. The man who sees her shadow, Jung might have said, does not fear her. He recognizes himself. This is the new rite of passage. Not to dominate women, not to control them, but to remain unshaken in the presence of their storm. To discern between the woman who reflects your vision and the woman who requires you to shrink it. To speak, not to be approved, but because truth must be spoken. To love, not for completion, but from overflow. You do not exist to absorb her guilt. You do not exist to manage her shame. You are not her therapist. You are not her scapegoat. You are not her projection. You are a standard, a mirror she cannot manipulate, a presence she either rises to meet or removes herself from. The modern man is being hunted, not by women, but by his own willingness to trade clarity for comfort. And Jung's letters were not just psychological observations, they were spiritual warnings. Do not mistake female possession for feminine power. Do not mistake projection for truth. Do not mistake sabotage for passion. The man who survives this age is not the man who shouts. He is the one who sees. He sees the animus. He sees the reversal. He sees the test. And he does not react. He remains. He does not try to fix her. He does not try to teach her. He does not try to convince her. He simply stands, so clearly, so fully, that her shadow burns off in the light of his unwavering frame. This is the only way out. Not more game, not more red pills, not more submission masked as strategy. Just the man, awake, rooted, uncompromised. So if this cut deep, leave a comment below. I see the shadow. If you know a man who's collapsing to be loved, share this with him. And subscribe, because in the next video, we reveal keys to awaken men to their original destinies. Until then, remember, you are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose yourself.